Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm very excited and proud, quite frankly, honored to be able to join the Hire a Vet campaign and help support our veterans here in Maine. So thank you so much for having me. I am the nurse recruiter for our nurse residency program, though I do these presentations on interview skills as well as resume skills. And I do it across the state to help supplement and support our talent team and the endeavors that we have of growing our organization and also educating people in Maine. So I don't just hire nurses. Our team, of course, encompasses much more than that to help Northern Light Health. So hopefully this presentation is helpful and beneficial to you to hear some experiences from recruiters of what's going on in terms of interviews, the pitfalls we've seen. I will briefly cover resumes. I do have that embedded into my presentation, but I'll go over it just at a high level as many of you joined the prior session. And then we'll go from there. So I'm going to share my screen. Actually, I do have to have that enabled. My apologies. It looks like I don't have those privileges.
You're on.
Can you see my screen? All right, here we go.
Try sharing it again.
All right.
There you go, full screen share, you're good.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so as we begin here, so I'm gonna click, I like to click through these things all at once so we can go ahead and look at them. Again, just to revisit some of the ideas that you have with your resume and your cover letter. This is really gonna be your first impression when an organization gets to know you and gets to meet you. So there are a variety of ways that we can make this first acquaintance, if you will. Resumes used to be in the format that you had something tangible and that was in your hand and that you went and dropped off at facilities. And obviously we know now that that is not necessarily going to be the case because we do have everything or most everything done electronically these days. So you have a little bit more flexibility with regard to format styles. I will highlight a few styles here that we can look at just briefly again to help reflect who you are as an individual, some of that uniqueness that you can instill. We do have to make sure that even though we are making them a little bit more unique, that they are still professional, legible, and relative to you. That sounds quite silly, but you would be surprised with some of the resumes that we have seen here at Northern Light Health and in other career paths that I've had. One major thing that we ask is that you don't put pictures or clip art on it. And that, again, should be something that we already know, but you'd be surprised. Unfortunately, things like pictures can also put us in a precarious situation as recruiters, where we may be able to get your general age, know demographic information about you, and things that we maybe shouldn't know as we're going through that process. And we don't want to, put you at a disadvantage. We do our darndest not to do those things, but you want to make sure you don't have pictures on it. You have to have a clear structure of your past jobs, volunteering, internships, and I'll show a few examples of how you can do that and highlight them, as well as the skills you've had as a veteran, whether that's additional training or specific actions that you've had in your roles that you really want to highlight. Be clear about your impact of those roles, and as always, check for your spelling, not once, not twice, but probably a third time, and ask a friend or family member to go ahead and review it with you or for you. The human mind is a very unique thing. There is extensive research that shows if a letter is actually in the correct placement for the first and last letters of a word, our mind, even if incorrectly spelled, will be able to piece it together. And you don't want that beautiful trick that our mind does to accidentally mess up your resume or to look poorly on your resume. You want to avoid too much personal information. Again, anything that may create bias If you have gaps in employment that you have on your resume, there are wonderful strategies you can use in conversation of your interview to help explain those, as opposed to putting too much information on that resume. Don't oversell or embellish about who you are. Be confident but not arrogant. And use this opportunity almost like the inside of a book cover, right? That jacket that gives a synopsis of who you are, making someone intrigued and want to get to know you better, as opposed to a dump of information that can be overwhelming. Given that the average job has, goodness, over 250 in a study that I had read last year, 250 applicants for the average job. It is really important that you recognize we want to be able to know who you are relatively quickly, as we at Northern Light Health and many organizations still do hand read all of our resumes, as opposed to using algorithms to do that for us. So let's see. I do have in this presentation some wonderful action words that are standout action words that I'd be happy to share, or we can go ahead and share this presentation. These action words, and it's actually a 2-page list, are great to use so that we can very easily understand what it is that you specifically did in a particular role. These are really wonderful to have versed in your repertoire as you prepare for your interview as well, so that you can easily articulate your abilities. And of course, by practicing those and having these statements prepared, you will go into an interview and have it run that much more smoothly. A couple other tips for your resume that will really help us, because of course you're going to knock out the interview, you're going to do great, and we of course want to be able to get a hold of you. So your contact information, it seems like a really subtle thing or a really easy thing to put on a resume, but you want to make sure it's easily accessible so we can call you back or even call you for that first interview, and you want to make sure it doesn't take up too much space. So I have 3 examples here. The first, for John Doe, this was something I pulled off of an actual resume, redacting his information for privacy, of course. You know, we see here he takes up 3 lines to share his information. Originally, it had actually been more than that. He had separated his phone number onto a 4th line, and this takes up a lot of really valuable real estate. Also, as we're preparing and wanting to talk to you and get an interview scheduled, be mindful of those email addresses that you use. Wildside 15 may not be the best thing with regard to your professionalism. It may not look the best. Really be mindful too of those email addresses and the really repetition or pattern that we used years ago. You know, myself included, in the 90s, it was typically something, you know, for your email address with the year of birth at the end. And we did that because email addresses were really quickly being taken up and monopolized. The problem is that I can, as a recruiter, assume now how old you are. So be really mindful of what you use for those email addresses. We have 2 additional examples, either of which are really great for your resume to draw attention, but also compact that information. You can either do it at the top as part of your header, or add that as a footer so that once we've gone through your resume and are ready to call you for that interview, we know right how to get a hold of you. Be sure, as we talked about those action words, of course, previously, to use a lot of bullets and to, again, not oversell information or give too much information. So here's just another example of that. If this individual had gone ahead and removed the entirety of that bold section and perhaps broken it out into bullets, we'd be more easily able to assess what it is that he had done for a role. Also, some of the points that you have on your resume, make them more vague so that in your interview, you can actually go ahead and speak to them. If you have something that's quantitative, like a number that you have saved on a project, or perhaps a number of awards that you've won, you can list out the number of awards, or say maybe what area or specialty those awards were in, and then speak to them in an interview. And then be sure, again, to maximize on your vertical space. This is just a note I like to use with regard to your resumes. Again, it makes it a lot easier, even as a interviewer has your information or a copy of your resume, which you should always bring with you to an interview, to be able to highlight and see, for example, this person's educational background. They'd be able to see what internships they had done or externships, and maybe their system knowledge. You can break out whether it's volunteer work this way, which is a great way to help buffer your resume or fill in your resume, perhaps during a job gap, is with volunteer experience. You may be able to add those and highlight them in here. So don't be afraid of those vertical columns. If we're keeping our bullets short and concise, you may have quite a bit of it over there on the side. So try to use it as much as possible. And then with regard to resume blunders, we've heard of them all, likely seen them all. Our auto text and autocorrect on our phones is painful at times. I know mine has surely gotten me into some dangerous spaces. I have a couple of examples of that autocorrect here on this slide of someone stating rather than a part-time position, they were looking for a party-time position, taking orders, changing to taking odors, Spanish to spinach. And the worst that I have personally seen is an English major who had worked for a public school system accidentally being changed to a public school system. So be very mindful of those autocorrects. We've had resumes who have been printed on their current employer's letterhead. Surely don't ever do that. That of course shows that you're doing this on the job, on someone else's time clock, and you're not being respectful of that relationship with your current employer. So if you are currently employed, be sure not to do it at work. Be mindful of the interests that you put. Those really aren't necessary. Maybe something you can speak to, especially if transferable to the job that you're applying for in an interview. Languages, if you do know that you are bilingual or know multiple languages, if you are lucky enough to be able to manage more than one or two, be sure to add the fluency level. This can be really helpful because as much as we want to highlight your abilities, you want to show that humility, and you don't want to put yourself in a bad spot where maybe during an interview someone speaks to you in that language and you get caught off guard. So always a great thing to do. So you've gone through that application process. You have gone ahead and you have put all the hard work in. So now what? Before we even get to that interview process, there are steps on our back end that we do, which is why it may be a couple of days or even a week before you do hear from a recruiter. Hopefully, if it's with Northern Light Health, you actually have that within 3 business days. That's how we typically operate. Your application is sent to that recruiter in their job postings and those positions in an online forum. Typically, they review those, which may be a lengthy process, again, if it is done manually as opposed to an algorithm. We review all your cover letters, resume, and make sure that you meet the qualifications. If that is complete and we are satisfied with that application, it's sent to a hiring manager. You may receive an email in the interim advising that your email is under, or your application, excuse me, is under review. And then the hiring manager will receive that application, will be forwarded on to them, and they'll determine if they'd like to interview. So once you are selected, be prepared, or even as soon as you've applied, sometimes in that process, kind of behind the scenes, while the manager is reviewing your application, you may receive an email link for references. This is why, again, you shouldn't on your resume maximize that space. Utilize that space for references. We'll ask for it separately, or most employers will, whether it's in a separate email link or you need to bring a copy during the interview process. And then you'll go ahead and have that interview scheduled, which is when your prep work really starts for preparing for that interview. Before I go ahead and continue, do we have any questions so far or anything having come through the chat?
Nothing has come in through the chat yet.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So with regard to the interview, the biggest thing that we can recommend as you get ready for your interview is to practice. Things are a little crazy right now in terms of the world at large. Everybody's a little off kilter. Some companies, much like Northern Light Health, are utilizing Skype interviews or video conferencing interviews, which can be jarring for folks who have never done it before. We'll talk about that later here in this presentation, but you don't want to come to an interview already nervous, being thrown another hurdle of this video conferencing, and then really feel lost while you're going into the interview, because then you won't be as successful. So first and foremost, practice. Ask your friends, ask your family members. And I've actually highlighted some tools. Interestingly enough, Pinterest is really great to find some questions for your interviews. What I like to do personally is I create sticky notes. Trello is a wonderful tool that allows you to create online sticky notes. It is a free service. So I use that to kind of write out the things I've done and put them into categories or awards I've won to say, okay, if someone asks me a question, what might I be able to use this for? Kind of keep it in my toolkit, so to speak, so I know what that number is that I've done, or that quantitative figure, or qualitative, how did I impact a team? And I know it pretty offhand. I then make sure I bring those in preparation for my interview and review them before I actually walk in the door. So that's another great way to do that. Prepare some of those standard questions because we'll always ask, tell me about a difficult time that you've worked with a manager or a peer and how did you overcome it? Those sorts of things, you know, so you don't want to go, wait a minute, I'm not sure. It's much easier if you have a prepared answer or something that you can easily transfer. Prepare by researching the company's mission, vision, and history. The worst thing you can do is go into an interview and say that you have applied simply because you need a job. We know that. We respect that. And recruiters definitely want to help you if you're a good fit for the organization. But if you don't know who we are as an organization, that's going to be really tricky to figure out. So make sure that you know who you are, or who we are, excuse me, and maybe how our morals and what we believe in aligns with you so that we can make that connection. My mother had this wonderful expression that she drilled into my head, drove me crazy as a kid, but it's really true. To be early is to be on time is to be late, and to be late is unacceptable. You only have a finite amount of time in an interview to make a great impression. You don't want to be running late and already have put yourself at a disadvantage. So whether it's physically in person, arriving 10 minutes early to make sure that you're ready to go and there, just in case perhaps they end their other interview early, you can be. Make sure you log on to a Skype link or you've connected with the platforms. I've seen so many different online video conferencing tools. You want to make sure your computer doesn't have to download something, for example, and then therefore be late. Many professionals have a rule somewhere in their head, whether it's a 5-minute rule, a 7-minute rule, that if you don't join the Skype call, they're leaving. So again, you don't want to miss out. Always dress professionally and be aware of policies. We have fragrance policies if you're on site at many places. There may be tattoo or piercing policies that you need to be respectful of. Many of those can be found online, so simply Google it for that organization. Always dress professionally for those video conference interviews too, and we'll get to that here in a little bit and the why behind it. Come prepared to take notes. Do so either in a notebook that you may have, or if you have a binder, please don't ask to take those notes on a tablet or a mobile device, because we're not sure if you're going to be surfing the web and paying attention or really taking notes. I've even heard of individuals asking if they can record a Skype conference or if they can go ahead and maybe tape record a session. That could be beneficial for you as you write your thank you notes at the end of your interview, just so you can jog your memory about what specifically you talked about, as opposed to a generic "thanks for having me in today" message. Remember that the interview does not only start at the scheduled time. So I say this, and this is a great example. There was a peer of ours, goodness, who was telling me the story where she had an interview. She was going to be conducting for someone that morning. Before going into the office, she went ahead and got a cup of coffee. Ahead of her in line, there was a gentleman who was screaming at the poor barista because the order was wrong, yelling about how he was going to be late, about how he was going to not be able to get there on time, how his morning was ruined, and it was all this poor girl's fault. She was on the bad end of a bad morning. Unfortunately for him, he ended up being the interviewee that our peer was working with later that day, and she surely informed him that she had seen his reaction and outburst, and he had to try to overcome knowing that we got to see how he handled conflict, or she got to see how he handled conflict. So be aware of your surroundings, be generally nice. I've personally gotten a position before in a group interview setting. It was very uncomfortable. There were about 30 of us there, all having breakfast before an interview, because sometimes organizations will do group interview styles, probably less so now with the happenings of COVID. But I went into this interview setting, and there was a woman who had dirt on the side of her leg, salt or something like that, because it was February. And I kindly went over to her and told her, because I know that if I had left an interview and at the end of the day thinking I did great, looked down at my pant leg and realized I had salt the entire time and I was oblivious, I would have felt mortified. So we went through our day. I didn't think much of it. When I got the call for that position, the manager told me he thought I was a great candidate. He surely thought that I'd be a wonderful fit for their organization. And really, the cherry on top was that when he went over and asked that other candidate what I had spoken to her about, because she seemed a little flustered, she told him. And he knew then that I would be a really great team player, because I wanted to support other people and wasn't trying to bring others down or take that advantage. So really be mindful that people are watching, people are observing. And so it does not only start that interview at the time of 10 o'clock or right, at 9:30. So really be aware of those things. I'm going to go a step further. I'll follow up with that. Never mind. I'm hopping around. So highlight your clinical skills as well as transferable skills. Maybe not clinical, this presentation is more so for our hospital network, but you can also have skills that are very specific to a role or job you've had, even your military skills. Make sure that you don't underplay those because you don't think they're applicable. There are things like project management skills, working in a team dynamic. There are surely going to be roles that you have done that in your military life or in other jobs that I haven't. So make sure you highlight those because they make you unique. And you don't want, to have them forgotten, so make sure to play those up. Look back at those action words when you're trying to figure out how to highlight them. So that is something that is really important. Again, I cannot say this enough. Be confident, not arrogant. Be humble, not perfect. If we ask you what your shortcomings are, don't say nothing. Don't say that you're perfect. We all know that arrogant person who does that, and it's really off-putting. Try to find something, because you, of course, will be asked, what are your strong suits and what are your weaknesses? Try to find something that you can leverage, something that may be also a benefit. So, for example, my weakness, and I will say this, and hopefully my peers would agree with me and my colleagues, is that I offer to help other people so much. And I want to make sure that other people are balancing their work-life balance, that I want to support them. So I'll ask what I can do to help, how I can jump in. Even if that means my tasks get put lower, kind of on that totem pole of organization. The problem being is that I may have to overstretch myself to do that, or I'm procrastinating what I'm required to do to help someone else. So yes, it's a weakness. I acknowledge it. It's something I need to work on. It helps a manager know that they need to touch base with me, but at the same time, also highlights how I help in that, team dynamic. So that's just one example. There are surely plenty of others that you can use, and whatever it is that's specific to you. Come prepared with questions. Nothing is more uncomfortable when you get to the end of the interview and the recruiter goes, okay, what questions do you have? And you get a big fat, like you're catching flies. Don't do that. Come prepared with those questions, because that shows you're invested in our organization. That shows you're invested in the job. It could be something as subtle as, this is a wonderful experience. I'm very much looking forward to the opportunity. Can you please tell me what I should expect in this role, or what you're looking for in the first 30, 60, and 90 days? Because that shows you're looking to see what you can build. Perhaps asking about growth opportunities, professional development, shows that you're not looking to just stay for a year, but you have some long-term goals that are involved. That helps us as recruiters because we know we're making a good investment, and that helps managers know they're making a good investment. Coming prepared with questions also goes ahead and shows that you may have been doing research on the organization as well. So asking questions maybe about something that's either happened in the news or changes in the organizations that you've heard of, anything like that can be very helpful. Avoid things, of course, that are personal, political, and, of course, those topics we say, politics and religion should not be talked about in the workplace. Avoid those topics, of course. Let's see. So when we are talking about, and this is where I was going to hop back to, what to wear, how you present yourself for an interview, there are a couple different styles and formats depending on the organization you are looking to apply for or interview with, whether it's a business professional attire or business casual. If it is business casual, typically a recruiter or the hiring manager will let you know. We did that when I worked at General Electric in global operations in New York. So we allowed individuals to wear jeans, and we did let them know. So always assume business professional unless you're advised it's business casual. But this is a great representation, and this slide really helps to show what you should be really looking for in terms of what to wear. Typically solid colors as opposed to bright patterns, unless you would like to add in, a pop of color somewhere in a tie for gentlemen, or perhaps in a scarf for ladies. Make sure that your hair is neat and professional. Make sure that you are, wearing pantyhoses, ladies, in skirts or in pants. I know we don't like to wear those. They are uncomfortable, but it is a necessity. Some companies, like Eastern Maine Medical Center as a specific hospital, actually have rules on that. So you can always look up professional requirements or dress codes for those organizations. Some of the things like darker colored socks or darker colors in general, that is personal preference, but black, gray, blue, khaki, those tend to do a little bit better as opposed to a bright, bold, or neon color. So something to be mindful of. You get a little bit more leeway when you are in that business casual attire. But just think of it as something you would want to wear to present yourself well, and that you'd want others to see you in. I have been in situations, unfortunately, where we've had individuals come in for interviews not dressed professionally, coming in even with unnatural hairstyles or hair colors that are quite distracting. And frankly, we're humans, just like anybody else. And so we may get distracted by those things. An example is a gentleman who I interviewed with a 3.5-foot blue mohawk. And during the entirety of the interview, again, because I'm human and I'm a little inquisitive, I was thinking to myself, goodness, I wonder what product he used. Is it glue or is it beeswax? Is it flammable? How does it get in door frames? How long does that take him in the morning? Like all of those things that you should not be thinking about as you're trying to get to know someone. So if you can temper back some of those things, it will surely help us. And of course, you want to look as though you will fit in well with that organization. Something that's particularly jarring or doesn't fit the general mold of the pictures you see on the website or when you've gone into that establishment probably will put you at a disadvantage. So make sure you align with all of that imaging. All right, video conferencing. Now, video conferencing, as I previously mentioned, is going to be more common these days. And I think moving forward, we may see more and more of it as well, simply because we're starting to get into the habit. It's been now 6 months. So first and foremost, just because you may be home does not mean this is a casual FaceTime date with friends. You need to go ahead and make sure that you are being still professional and respectful. And actually, before I get too far into video conferencing, do we have any questions or anything in the chat so far? I'll pause.
No, it looks like we're okay, Kendra.
We're okay, great, thank you. All right, so yeah, make sure you don't get too comfortable. I know at home sometimes it's easy to do so, but you still want to have that level of professionalism. Dedicate a space to the appointment and to that interview. It's the most important thing you can do aside from remembering to be professional. Dedicating a space helps with a lot of different things. So first and foremost, it'll help you to be able to plan and be able to remove clutter, not only from immediately in front of the camera, but also behind you. Now, I will say, I am not in my personal space. I have hopped into the office today. And so, for example, if I were here and planning for an interview, I likely would have removed items from behind me. Preferences to solid colors or maybe things that, again, aren't too distracting, or who gives some items that are of that biased category. So make sure you go ahead and remove anything like that. So again, always dress professionally. Just because you're at home doesn't mean you should wear jeans from the waist down, because in the event that you have to get up unexpectedly, you don't want to be caught off guard. Or heaven forbid, if your webcam is at an angle you don't expect. There are some terrible blunders of that with our news men and women ever since COVID hit. There are some pretty funny examples of it, frankly, of individuals not realizing they were seen in just their boxers, or they were seen in a mirror that was behind them reflecting something. So really be conscientious of all of that. You can check those out on YouTube, I'm only sure. So make sure you have a strong internet connection on days like today with this terrible wind. That may be something you can't do for sure. You can't avoid the wind, but as much as possible, because again, you don't want that poor internet or weak internet connection to make it too difficult to hear, to have a granular image if someone's trying to see you, or that back and forth of can you hear me? So please be sure to have a strong internet connection, even if it's asking your friends, family, individuals who live within your home not to be online. It's difficult in the world of COVID, where many of us are working from home or attending school from home, or simply watching Netflix because we're not working and don't have something to do. But ask them for half an hour, and given the importance, I'm sure they will go ahead and be flexible with you. Still be prepared to take notes. You can do that with a notepad still next to you. I would avoid typing because that noise may go back into the speakers on your computer if you don't have a webcam separate from that actually in your PC or laptop. So avoid typing on that computer. Remember that the interview time, again, doesn't start just when the interview itself does at scheduled time. Join a few minutes early. Be mentally prepared a few minutes early, whether that's 10 or 15 minutes. Put yourself in that space. Make sure to breathe and be calm. And once you know that internet connection is sound, you've logged in, you should be good to go. Ask those who you live with to be respectful, not only of just that internet, but in helping you manage whether it's children in the home or pets. Honestly, I did a presentation myself, very similar to this just last week, and I got caught in that. I have 2 dogs at home. We're transitioning them together, and one of them is a howler. Oh goodness, she's loud. And the UPS guy showed up unexpected. And so during the presentation, I'm trying to get the dogs to stop and put them into a back room, and it was incredibly embarrassing. So really be mindful of those things. We never know what Fido's going to do, or if it's kiddos. You know, kids say the darndest things, and you don't want that in the middle of your interview. So really, those are the biggest tips that I can give for your video conferencing. Even though you're not in person, you can still always ask for a great contact number or email address and send that thank you note. And you should do that after every interview you do. Where things are moving very quickly or done electronically, an email may be faster than a thank you card. So be sure to ask for that contact information either way and get your note out to them. Thank them for their time, thank them for that hot topic or that thing that you have talked about during your interview that you took notes on, that was impactful to you and maybe really resonated with you and made you want to work for the organization more. That will be powerful to that hiring manager, knowing that you took the time. And then remember, when I meant to say this, my apologies, to emphasize your voice on those video conferencing calls, make sure they can hear you. So you can ask that in the beginning, you know, can you hear me now? Is everything all right? And then move forward. So my apologies for missing that one. But hopefully these helped in terms of video conferencing and interviewing skills. You know, it's never an easy thing. Interviews are jarring sometimes, they feel uncomfortable. Whether you're someone who is a little bit more reserved and introverted and you don't like putting yourself or overselling or being boastful, you're kind of quiet. If all you do is look down at your hands or you're uncomfortable and you don't speak, we won't get to know you. If you're someone who maybe just fidgets or doesn't, you know, like being in a closed room, some of these circumstances can be uncomfortable. If there is a trigger for you of any kind, or even if it's just, I don't like talking to new people, you know, that can be uncomfortable to go through the interview process. And even if you're not, it's still stressful. You want to get a job. There are so many wheels kind of spinning in most of our heads as we're looking for a new job. You're either doing so because you're unhappy where you currently are, or because you're unemployed. Both of those stressors can make us think, what is this going to do if I don't get this job? How quickly could I move to this new job? Wheels start turning. And when wheels start turning, sometimes you get smoke. And you don't want to psych yourself out for an interview. So breathe. Remember, we've all done it. Yeah.
We have a question from the audience.
Of course.
From Leo Dion. Is there a preference between a thank you card / note or an email?
So I personally would say, outside of in normal circumstances, outside of COVID, I would say a thank you card is preferred by me. You know, that's my preference as a card. That being said, not knowing if many HR managers or hiring managers may be working remotely part-time, I think an email is a faster and more direct way to get a hold of someone given the current circumstances. Great question.
Hey, Kendra, there's another question that came to me.
Yes.
How would you address diverse cultures who live and work in Maine as far as the dress code goes? Are these recommendations kind of biased or opinionated, or is there room for leniency in those areas?
There's room for leniency for sure. Some variability. I would say, you know, the biggest thing is to remain conservative in your attire. You know, especially ladies, not to show too much cleavage or wear things that are too tight. You know, in terms of, you know, whether you wear a jacket or a tie, if that's not, you know, comfortable for you because of cultural preference or something like that, then don't. And if you have a tire that is cultural specific, there's nothing wrong with being proud of that. So by all means, feel free to integrate that into your style, even while you're in an interview. Does that answer that question for you, my friend?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Nothing in chat at this time, Kendra. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, so with interviews, as I had mentioned, it is stressful for everyone as we get through and go through those. So being prepared, you already know these things. You already know who you are. So we're not quizzing you on something that you don't already know, which is why that practice is so important. We're just trying to get to know you. We're not interrogators. So try to let that ease your mind with regard to some of that additional stress. Now, once you do go through the interview, you've gone through the stress, the weight is lifted, don't immediately panic if you don't hear back immediately. Sometimes you do hear back from jobs just like that. Other times, because of the volume of candidates, we do have to finish interviews, or we want to make sure we've selected the right candidate for a role. So if you haven't heard back from your recruiter or from an interview, you can always follow up with that contact at, about a week later to say, hey, I just wanted to touch base. And I'd be happy to follow up with you again if you have a timeline as to when you expect to fill the position. Asking for that timeline is also a great thing to do during the interview, so that maybe you don't follow up every week, but one time to follow up is always nice or a good thing to do. Now, if you get the job, that's wonderful and that's ideal. That's what we want. We want to make sure that you get the job you hope for. But if you don't, because there are a multitude of applicants, be sure to follow up with the recruiter and ask what other positions they may recommend for you. Or mention that you really liked a particular hiring manager that you had spoken with to see if perhaps they have other opportunities. Make sure to maintain that connection as much as possible. Of course, don't harass someone. If they redirect you to the website, then be sure to follow up with the website. But if you can leverage the connection, it's not a bad thing to do. So that's always great as well. Now, with regard to us here at Northern Light Health, I have a little bit of information for you folks. Just can learn a little bit about who we are if you don't already know. Northern Light Health is one of the largest, or the second largest medical network here in the state of Maine, with member hospitals across the state. So really anywhere that you may be here in Maine, there is likely a Northern Light Health facility near you, and therefore availability for some job opportunities. We do have services in home care and hospice, emergency transport companies, nursing homes and retirement communities, integrated physician groups, work health, laboratories, pharmacies, our Beacon Health, our foundation, and in our workforce EAP, above and beyond just our hospitals. That's one thing I want everyone to take out of their vocabulary when it comes to your employment. Whether it's looking for a job, they're just a hospital. They're just in healthcare. They just want clinical people. Just does not apply. No different than when you're talking about your experience. I was just a waitress. No, as a waitress, you may have had great customer service skills, great time management skills, dedication to your team. No different than when you're talking about your military experience. You weren't just enlisted for a period of time. You served your country, so be proud of that. So take just out of your choice of words. With regard to Northern Light Health, we do have 12,000 plus employees who work and help support and operate all of what we have to do here in our communities, which is a heck of a lot based on those services. So hopefully you could go ahead and join us as part of that group. We do have a list of top positions that we have availability for, and the wonderful part about Northern Light Health is that once you have gotten into our network, you have the availability, whether as an internal transfer at that same facility or office, or an in-system transfer going to one of our many other locations to grow your career and your path. As early as 6 months, you can go ahead and do that transfer. So you can really help build your career quite quickly once you are in the Northern Light Health family. One of my peers, Tracy, actually had started as part of our transport facility or services, and is now a recruiter here in HR in a very short period of time. So that's just one example. I've seen others who go through our CNA programs, then into nursing programs, and then into management roles. So maybe something to look into is maybe a path and a stepping stone into a larger goal of yours. If you are interested in our nursing program, we do have residency programs that will help you as you transition from an academic program into the application. And so I have this, and we'll again allow that presentation to be shared to go ahead and learn more about that program should someone be interested in attending nursing school. Northern Light Health and our residency program is a great place to start. And if you are interested in Northern Light Health and all that we have to offer, we do have our careers website, which is careers.northernlighthealth.org. You can go ahead and create a job profile by setting up that username and password, and then search many and all of the postings that we have available to you. You can filter these based on whether it's a specific keyword that you're looking for. You can filter based on location if you'd like to stay in a certain area of the state. It can be perhaps on expertise, whether clinical, administrative, non-clinical, positions are all available. Then you can also create a job alert. If the position you're looking for or something that isn't quite perfect for you isn't available on the website at the current time, that job alert will give you a push notification direct to your email, reminding you of your interest in Northern Light Health when something matching your criteria comes up. And then once you've created that job posting, maybe found the job you're interested in, be sure to enter in your information. It is a 7-page application with us, and you do typically have to enter that manually as opposed to it reading from an attached document, especially if you are saving your resume as a PDF, which you should, because if I have a different version of Word than what you're using, it may be jumbled otherwise. So you'll have to enter in that information, but goodness, you'll only have to do it once. So it's worth the time. And in terms of what we are looking for in who we are as an organization and our employees, we're looking for a positive attitude. Of course, we are servicing our community. And it's a community we're very proud of. It's one where we as employees live, work, and operate. So we, of course, want to do so as if we ourselves were patients at one of our facilities. Excellent customer service skills, both internally to your peers as well as to the external public-facing individuals, is important too for that same reason. We expect that our employees be dependable and reliable, that they have a solid attendance, that they're willing to do the things they say they will, whether it's a project or task or even showing up. Ownership of your job, making sure that you can be accountable for the things that you've done and are proud in that job and look to get it done, and therefore maybe have some flexibility in your role, which helps with your commitment to your coworkers, helping them in projects or things like that, making sure that it's a team effort. We look for initiative and motivation, someone who's looking to be a go-getter, maybe asking and looking to grow that professional development ladder is a great way to show that initiative during the interview and make you stand out. Integrity is so important to us as well as your general skills. So all of these things will help you stand out in your resume, down to your interview, and then of course as an employee at Northern Light Health. So that is the end of my information and presentation. Do we have any questions? And maybe we can use the last few minutes to answer those so we make sure to maximize on our time.
Kendra, there are no additional questions in chat, but we'll wait a few minutes. I might ask you to please stay on the meeting beyond at the end so we can have a few words with you, please.
Sure.
If there are Anyone that would like to unmute themselves and possibly ask a question in person, you're more than welcome to do so at this time. Robin D says thank you, Kendra. Mark Cafiso says thank you as well. Matthew, you've been very thorough. One of the most informative and thorough presentations I've seen. You're great. You're a great operator. You're great. So a lot of good compliments, Kendra.